Hello, I'm Ben Crystal, and I'm an actor and an author and a patron of Shakespeare Week. And I'm delighted to share this story of The Winter's Tale with you to celebrate Shakespeare Week 2021. Now, this version of The Winter's Tale is from Marcia Williams' beautiful book, Tales from Shakespeare. I hope you enjoy this once upon a time. The Winter's Tale. King Leontes of Sicily was feeling grumpy. There was too much hustle at court. His beloved wife, Queen Hermione, was expecting their second child any day now, so all her ladies were rushing around in high excitement. Their young son, Prince Mamilius, was entertaining everyone with his most exciting tales, and Leontes' good friend, King Polixenes, was preparing to return to his own kingdom of Bohemia. Polixenes was Leontes' oldest and dearest friend, and he had been staying with Leontes for the past 9 months. It had been a grand time, and the two men had delighted in sharing childhood memories, but now Polixenes was eager to depart. The winter weather was closing in, and he was missing his own son, Prince Florizel. Polixenes hugged his friend warmly and thanked him for his hospitality. "Stay your thanks a while, and pay them when you part," replied Leontes, shrugging his friend off. "Sir, that's tomorrow," smiled Polixenes. Leontes did not return the smile. He had tried and failed to persuade his old friend to stay. In a final effort to get Polixenes to change his plans, he asked Queen Hermione to persuade Polixenes to delay his departure. To please her husband, Hermione used all her feminine wiles to cajole Polixenes into staying. Finally, she succeeded. "He'll stay, my lord," she cried triumphantly. "At my request he would not," replied Leontes, feeling a sudden rush of jealousy. Hermione laughed at her husband's ungracious response and gave Polixenes her hand in gratitude. Leontes fixed his eyes upon their linked hands, and his heart began to thunder against his chest. "My heart dances, but not for joy," he muttered to himself. He stomped off, leaving Hermione to entertain his friend. "Something seems unsettled," said Hermione, hoping that his mood would pass if he was left to himself. However, the jealousy that had taken hold of Leontes was not shifted that easily. Faster and louder beat his heart, until it had driven all sane thoughts from his head. His wife had never shown herself to be anything but loving and faithful, and Polixenes was like a brother to him. Yet Leontes was now convinced that the pair were in love. In a state of rage, he went to see Lord Camillo, his friend and adviser. "My wife is slippery," he informed him. "Good my lord, be cured of this diseased opinion, for 'tis most dangerous," Camillo cried. "Say it be. 'Tis true," said the king, furious that Camillo dared to argue with him. "No, no, my lord," said Camillo, who was certain Queen Hermione loved Leontes. "It is. You lie, said Leontes, beside himself with anger and jealousy. "I say thou liest, Camillo, and I hate thee." Camillo was shocked by Leontes' fury, but there was something more shocking to come. Leontes asked him to poison a cup and kill Polixenes. The king grabbed Camillo's jacket and held him close. "Do it, and thou hast the one half of my heart," he promised. "Do it not, thou splitst thine own." Camillo was left shaken and trembling by this terrible request. Could Leontes be serious? If so, must Camillo obey his king's command and murder an innocent man? for Camillo did not doubt that King Polixenes was innocent. "Methinks my favour here begins to warp," thought Camillo uneasily. Camillo decided to tell Polixenes of Leontes' wicked plan and flee with him to Bohemia that very night. Leontes seemed to have been struck by a terrible disease of the mind, but Camillo was sure he would soon recover. Then he would be able to return to Sicily. The whole court soon became aware of the king's anger. Hermione was confused and hurt by her husband's sudden coldness, and she took comfort in her little son, Mamillius. She sat with him in front of a warm fire while he tried to think up an exciting story to distract her. "A sad tale's best for winter," he said, stroking her hand. "I have one of sprites and goblins." "Let's have that, good sir," smiled his mother sadly. "There was a man," said Mamillius in a ghostly whisper, "dwelt by a churchyard." But Mamillius never got any further with his tale, for at that moment his father burst through the door, followed by his armed guards. "Bear the boy hence, he shall not come about her," Leontes ordered, determined that Hermione should have nothing more to do with the young prince. "Away with her to prison." Mamillius cried out for his mother, but Leontes was unmoved. Camillo and Polixenes had escaped earlier that night, and he was now convinced that they and Queen Hermione were plotting to murder him. Hermione bore all this with quiet dignity, sure that her husband would soon return to his senses. She asked only that she might take her ladies and her friend Paulina to prison with her, for her baby was about to be born. The rest of the court looked on in horror at these events. "Be certain what you do, sir, lest your justice prove violence," one lord dared to say. "Beseech your highness call the queen again," begged another. But Leontes just grew angrier. "Hold your peaces," he yelled. Mamillius was heartbroken to think of his adored mother in jail and refused to eat. Day after day, the prince grew weaker, but still Leontes would not repent. He was determined to bring his wife to court and see her sentenced to death. Hoping to silence the many courtiers who doubted his wife's guilt, he sent 2 lords to consult the oracle at Delphi in Greece. Meanwhile, in prison, Hermione gave birth to a daughter, Perdita. Her friend, Paulina, in a bid to soften Leontes' heart, wrapped the baby in Hermione's favourite shawl, fixed it with one of her brooches, and presented her to Leontes. "The good queen, for she is good," said brave Paulina, "hath brought you forth a daughter. Here 'tis, commends it to your blessing." "Out!" yelled Leontes furiously, "a mankind witch! Hence with her, out a door!" "I pray you do not push me, I'll be gone," said Paulina. "Look to your babe, my lord, 'tis yours." Paulina left little Perdita at the king's feet. Leontes looked down on the infant with loathing, convinced that she was not his child, but Polixenes. "This brat is none of mine. Take it up. I'll not rear another's issue." He yelled at Antigonus, Paulina's husband. He ordered him to take Paulina and set sail for some foreign shore, and there abandon Perdita to her fate. "Come on, poor babe," crooned Antigonus, as he lifted Perdita into his arms and carried her away from the king's wrath. Leontes decided he would not wait to hear what the oracle decreed, and he ordered Hermione's trial to start at once. Hermione entered the court with her ladies and her friend Paulina, her head held high. As soon as the court sat and the session began, the two messengers returned from Delphi. After swearing that the oracle had not been tampered with, one of the lords read out its secrets to the court. Hermione is chaste, Polixenes blameless, Camillo a true subject, Leontes a jealous tyrant, his innocent babe truly begotten, and the king shall live without an heir, if that which is lost be not found. The oracle had proclaimed Hermione innocent. Now, blessed be the great Apollo, cried the whole court, apart from Leontes. There is no truth at all in the oracle. The sessions shall proceed, he ordered. Then, all of a sudden, a servant ran into the courtroom. He had terrible news to report. Mamilius, overwhelmed by sorrow, had suddenly died. A gasp of horror went round the court, and Hermione collapsed to the floor. This news is mortal to the queen, sobbed Paulina, as she helped to carry Hermione from the courtroom. Suddenly, Leontes' madness seemed to leave him, and he woke to the terrible harm his wicked jealousy had caused. Apollo's angry, and the heavens themselves do strike at my injustice, he cried. He fell to his knees and begged Apollo for forgiveness. But his repentance came too late, for Paulina returned to tell him that Hermione had also died. Her poor heart had been unable to take the pain of losing her 2 children and her husband's love. Paulina railed against Leontes in her misery. The king was desolate and deeply ashamed, and he took every angry word that Paulina threw at him as his due punishment. He swore to her that he would live a life of mourning. Will you swear never to marry but by my free leave? Said Paulina. Never, Paulina. So be my blessed spirit, he swore. Meanwhile, out at sea, a storm had hit the ship carrying Antigonus and Perdita and driven it onto the shores of Bohemia. The ship and all its crew were lost to the rocks and the raging sea, but Antigonus had managed to wade ashore with Perdita, safe in his arms, still wrapped in Hermione's shawl. As the rain lashed at his face, he found shelter for this tiny bundle between 2 rocks. There he left Perdita to her fate. He turned back towards the sea, hoping to find a ship that would take him back to Sicily. But as he slipped and scrambled across the rocks, a huge bear reared up at him out of the darkness. Poor Antigonus was never heard of again. Luckily, Perdita was found by a shepherd who was out looking for lost sheep. He took her home to his wife, and they cared for her as a daughter for the next 15 years. Perdita grew into a beautiful young woman, and although she was brought up as a shepherdess, she had all the natural charm and grace of a princess. Indeed, when Prince Florizel, son of King Polixenes, met her whilst out hunting, he fell in love with her in an instant. I bless the time when my good falcon made her flight across thy father's ground, he said to Perdita. For if it hadn't been for the falcon, how would a prince ever have met and fallen in love with a shepherd's daughter? Lord Camillo, who was living with Florizel and King Polixenes at their palace, would have been astonished if he had known that his old friend King Leontes' daughter was living as a shepherdess just a few miles from the palace. Camillo longed to return to Sicily. He had heard that Leontes had recovered from his madness and now lived a quiet and gentle life. However, King Polixenes would not hear of Camillo leaving, for he had come to rely on his advice. Indeed, when Polixenes heard rumours that his son was courting a lowly shepherd's daughter, he turned at once to Camillo. He wanted to meet Perdita for himself, and wanted Camillo to go with him. The two men disguised themselves as peasants and set off for Perdita's home. There they found Florizel and Perdita, and were astonished to be asked to witness their engagement. So complete were their disguises that Florizel hadn't even recognized his own father. King Polixenes was outraged that his son should become engaged to a shepherd's daughter, and without his permission. He threw off his hat and false beard and angrily forbade the engagement. "Thou art too base to be acknowledged," he cried to his son. "Follow us to the court." But Camillo was charmed by the two young lovers and thought he might use their love to his advantage. As soon as King Polixenes was out of earshot, he persuaded them to escape to Sicily and beg King Leontes' support for their marriage. He felt sure that Leontes would not refuse to help the son of his old friend Polixenes. "Methinks I see Leontes opening his free arms and weeping his welcomes forth," he assured them. Camillo hoped that once Florizel and Perdita were safely aboard a ship to Sicily, he would be able to bring Polixenes around to the idea of the marriage and follow the pair back to his beloved homeland. So, the two lovers travelled to Sicily, accompanied by the shepherd. As Camillo had predicted, King Leontes welcomed Prince Florizel to his court with open arms, crying, "Most dearly welcome, and your fair princess, goddess." Leontes could not stop staring at Perdita. She looked exactly like his lost wife. Sad memories came flooding back to him, and he told his guests how he had caused the deaths of his wife and son, and sent his daughter away. As King Leontes talked, it dawned on the shepherd that Perdita could be Leontes' daughter. At first, no one could believe this possible, but finally, all agreed it must be so. Many rumours flew about the court as to how it was proved. One gentleman swore the baby was found with the mantle of Queen Hermione. "Methought I heard the shepherd say he found the child," whispered another. Leontes was overcome with happiness. "The oracle is fulfilled," everyone agreed. Perdita wanted to know what her mother had looked like, so Paulina agreed to show her a statue of the queen, which she kept at her house. When she threw the curtain from around the statue, the princess and her father gasped. Hermione looked so lifelike, and so very like Perdita. "Chide me, dear stone, that I may say indeed, 'Thou art Hermione,'" the king whispered in wonder. "The very life seems warm upon her lip." He could not take his eyes off the statue. The sculptor must have been most talented, he thought, for this statue showed Hermione as she might have looked that very day, older than when her husband and wife had last met. "Hermione was not so much wrinkled," he remarked. Paulina smiled and called for music. To everyone's amazement, the statue began to move. Slowly, as though waking from a long dream, Hermione, for it was really her, descended the pedestal and embraced Leontes. "She's warm," he sighed. "If this be magic, let it be an art lawful as eating." Hermione had always kept faith in the oracle. Believing that one day Perdita would be found, she waited in secret, walking like a ghost through the castle, hoping for this moment. Now, after so many years of loneliness, she was reunited with both her husband and her daughter. When King Polixenes arrived and discovered his son's shepherdess was actually a princess, he gave his blessing for Florizel and Perdita's marriage. So the two families were joined in harmony once more. Only Paulina, who had helped bring about this happiness, was dissatisfied, for her husband had never returned from his encounter with the bear on the shores of Bohemia. "I, an old turtle, will wing me to some withered bough, and there my mate, that's never to be found again, lament till I am lost," she grumped. "Oh, peace, Paulina," laughed Leontes. "Thou shouldst a husband take. Come, Camillo." He gave Paulina's hand in marriage to Camillo, for they had long held each other in deep affection. So ended the strange story of how Paulina kept Hermione hidden and how Perdita was found. A wonderful winter's tale to tell by the fireside. For although the tale is tinged with sadness, as poor Prince Mamilius once said, a sad tale was best for winter. The end.